Hi, this is Matt Hugg with Nonprofit.Courses on behalf of Great Careers. And today we have a very interesting speaker, Perry Monastero, who's going to be talking about my epiphany working independent in the nonprofit sector. And Perry brings a very interesting perspective. I'll let him tell the story, but if you're ever considering going out on your own and becoming an independent consultant, here's the video to watch. Let's get started.
I've always been a huge fan of nonprofits, going back to when I was a youth. But I actually fell into the work right out of college. And after 25 years of serving a number of institutions, education, health, social justice organizations, I grew tired of being at one place for 9+ years. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, I had 5 bosses in a 18-month period. It was a lot of tumult. It was very tumultuous,
Yeah.
and it made it difficult to fundraise, and it didn't seem like there'd be an end in sight with that type of situation. And at the time, a friend of mine that I had done a lot of work, particularly on advancing legal rights for those that don't have it, she wanted to run for judge. And in the state of Pennsylvania, right or wrong, like so many states, I think it's a handful, you must be elected to become a judge.
Yes.
And she asked me if I would be involved in her fundraising campaign. And I looked at her.
Because it's the same, right? Fundraising and fundraising, right?
It's not. And I said, I know nothing about political fundraising. And she said, that's okay. I trust you. And I'm not a typical judicial candidate, which she wasn't. And at the time, there were 48 candidates running for these 4 spots.
Wow.
And I thought, you know what? I really believe in her. And she was very persistent. And I thought I'd give it a shot. And it was an opportunity to do something different. And so I did. And what I learned from that experience is that there's a tremendous strength in having urgency surrounding fundraising of a campaign. And I think nonprofits could learn a bunch from that. I certainly did. And also the fact that you can't wait around to make decisions. You have to make them on the spot. And quite often, a con to that type of work is that you don't have the opportunity to do an evaluation. You have to think on your feet. And so you might make the wrong or not the best ideal situation for a particular campaign. So there are pros and cons to it. And while I was doing that, a number of folks started contacting me about, hey, do you think you might want to help us out with a project? And I would think, no, I can't right now. But I started referring to other folks. And towards the end of the campaign, my other half and I were like, maybe that's the universe calling and knocking on the door.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, let's give it a shot. And I started off with one client and got a second one after the campaign was over. And these were nonprofit clients, Matt. They weren't political campaigns. My fourth client was Danielle S. Patterson running for the 190th in Philadelphia. But since then, it's been mostly nonprofits. And
for clarification, the 190th is a state rep district, right?
To be yes, sorry.
Yes. Okay. Right. Well, the folks who aren't in Pennsylvania may not grab that.
Well, I don't think they would unless they knew much about West Philadelphia. It is the precinct in the Haddington area of Philadelphia, and she was a lifelong resident and an outstanding candidate for that opportunity. So there's a lot of similarities between the type of work, but and they're both in public service, essentially.
Right.
But then I was able to go ahead.
No. So I see a lot of potential for discussion here, because this is something that a lot of folks don't always grasp, which is it on its surface, it does feel like fundraising is fundraising. And yet there's a lot of differences in terms of, I understand, rules, right? And and then there's, when I teach my classes, I talk about the transaction relationship continuum, and how, at least the impression I have is that political fundraising is much more transactional than relationship based. And so it's much more short term as opposed to long term.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, can you do a little compare contrast that way for us?
Well, sure. I mean, with political fundraising, you're looking at making a case for why somebody is the best person to bring change or bring stability or bring whatever it is that they say they're going to bring.
Mm-hmm.
And the results would be pretty quick because that person often has unilateral decision-making authority for a geographic area. In the case of the nonprofits, you're talking about a completely different situation. The gift can make an impact in particular ways. Like a nonprofit could say, your gift of $20 helps provide digital learning for a child in India for an entire year, or your gift of $100 a month provides 12 meals a week for a family in the city of Philadelphia. So there are ways you could demonstrate impact, but in terms of nonprofits' need for sustainability, you want folks that are going to be able to give on a long-term basis or once a year. So when I say long-term, I mean like 5 years in a row, maybe 10 years in a row.
Right.
That will help build sustainability, and that will build more credibility for the nonprofit if they are listening to their donors as they are giving. If they are just transactionally receiving funds, like some nonprofits have events, and those are more transactional, but the ones that engage their donors are able to raise more money that's sustainable and will get them year after year. If it's an event, that's more like political fundraising. Those opportunities, in my experience, have been more transactional and less relationship based. But you raise a good point. The relationships are essential for the nonprofits.
Yeah, yeah, and I imagine, I mean, there is some basis of a relationship in political fundraising, but
Sure.
it's a different kind of thing.
Right. Are you aligned with our particular set of what the platform is? And if the platform is not aligned with the political donor, then they're not going to give.
Yeah. And I will tell you, and I confess that the one thing that scares me about political fundraising are the rules, because they seem really arcane.
Well, if you're running for judge, you can't
this or that, or whatever, however it works. It just really seems like it's almost a gotcha game.
It can be. It's also designed to protect the integrity of the process.
Yeah.
If you're running for judge, you can't ask for money. You have to have other people on your behalf ask for money. So it was kind of fun to have these conversations. It'd be like 4 of us, and the judge would be like explaining the judicial candidate, Tiffany was her name, would be explaining her priorities and how she would approach family court situations and make it more inclusive to families, and especially those with children. And she had other platform issues. But then she would say, and now my friend Perry here has something he would like to share with you. Perry, would you take it? Take it from here. And then, so then I would make the ask. It was actually kind of comical in some ways.
Have that little road show going.
That's what she called it.
Yeah. Well, and that, to me, that sounds a little bit like major gift fundraising, where you bring in an executive director or somebody or a volunteer who may not be comfortable with the ask, and then you kind of play back and forth. But it's that's fascinating.
Yeah. It's never a dull moment, for sure.
Yeah. What now? A lot of people who either have a nonprofit background or want to bring their skills to a nonprofit, are one of the big, their biggest stumbling block, as I see, is connecting with clients, is getting out there, getting known. It's kind of the marketing, right? Because you can do your thing. Most people who get into independent work know they can do whatever the thing is, but how do you get other people to give you money to do your thing?
So I think what you're asking me is, how do I acquire people to engage me professionally?
Yeah, right. How's that work?
How does that work? Well, all right. So, excuse me. Okay. Somehow I need to probably, if I had water, I would drink it, but I have a Diet Coke. Excuse me.
That's okay. We can edit this part.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
The folks who know me have been my early clients, and then folks who know me have been referral sources. And so that's how I've been able to build up the practice. It was very slow. I started 2 years ago, and then, month 5, this thing called the pandemic happened, and it
Whoops.
froze a lot of nonprofits in their approach to
Yes.
board recruitment, to fundraising, to doing programs. Many of my all of my clients had to move everything online, virtually,
Sure.
everything online. It was tremendously tumultuous time. And it was also not a great time to acquire new clients. And so things picked up by the end of last fall. And it was largely, as I mentioned, through word of mouth, and also through people that I was sharing what I was doing were telling other folks. Initially, my clients were mostly startups, beginners, folks that were early days of their nonprofit. And the way that things have transitioned now, there's a lot of similarity to my clients now. They are also scaling at a rapid rate. And so there's similarities between, if you're a nonprofit scaling really fast, the issues are very similar to a startup, because you have to build everything tremendously fast. And there are, again, a lot of similarities with the campaigns, political campaigns, because you have to like build up the house and start filling up the house with, you have a stove. I got to put a stove in there. Okay. Do we have a door in the back? Yeah, we need an emergency door in the back. That's metaphorical.
Yeah, right.
In some cases, there's brick and mortar. Like I'm working with the first ever foster care agency in a county of 2 million people in California. And that's exciting because, believe it, yeah, it's also, most of it is desert. Okay. So it's tremendously rural, but there's one area that has 2 million people, but still there's not, in that county, it's about as large as three of the smallest states in the United States. All these youth get shipped up to 500 miles away. They don't have a home where they're from. They're going to need doors and stuff.
they will need that back door, that emergency back door. So it sounds like it's almost like a job search, where a lot of it is networking. A lot of it is people and then folks connect you with somebody they know, and they know your skills and say, hey, Perry's your guy.
You're absolutely right. A lot of it is networking. A lot of it is just sharing with folks your stories about these organizations, and then folks take inspiration from that. It's similar to those who want to join boards or be involved in organizations in some way as a committee member. There's a level of networking and trying to find the best match for what your skills are. And also, do you find an organization that matches your own life mission? So if you're a proponent of education, you're a proponent of addressing, let's say, food insecurity or hunger, you might want to find organizations that do that work. And then there's even a better match.
Well, so what you're kind of putting together here is two threads that I think in nonprofit world are really important. That you have the mission, that if you're an independent consultant, or if you're looking for a job, right, you have the mission of the organization, and then you have your skill set.
Yes. And
being able to find that intersection for whomever you're working for, whether it's employment or 1099, consulting relationship. And so what have you found what are those two for you? What's the mission and what's the skill set?
So for me personally, I've always been a proponent of social justice, economic justice organizations, and health and education. And because that's so much a part of who I am, I even did my dissertation research on how nonprofits align with movements, whether they're political, religious, or social justice movements. It holds tremendous value to me. And so it's translated not just for my own volunteer work, but my own personal work. So there's a lot of value to me and a lot of alignment. It makes it easier also to talk with similar organizations that have their own mission to make change in the world or improve the world in a way that matches my experience and my perception of how the world should go. So it ends up it doesn't feel like work, Matt.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that's huge. Yeah. So then what skills do you bring to them that, I mean,
Oh yeah, you did
you're
ask
not,
me about skills. Yes,
you're
yeah, you
not
did.
in a, yeah, right. No, this is good. No, I want bit to that. So we got the mission part there, right?
Right.
So you're not an event planner,
No,
right? You're
I have
not
done it.
yeah, right. I know you're probably like me, that's nice, but um, other people, for me at least, I know other people can do it better.
Right.
But what is it what skill do you bring?
So I'm excellent and outstanding at assisting boards grow their infrastructure, their policies, and work through strategy. And also, coupled with that, I often provide fundraising strategy and implementation.
Hmm,
Most of the organizations looking to scale at a rapid pace need to do both at the same time. And so it's helpful that I've been a generalist in the nonprofit space, but have deep experience in those two areas for
okay.
these types of organizations. So if they're at a place in their life cycle where they're growing rapidly or they're new, then somebody like me would be probably a good match. But
Yeah.
I know when it's not, and more than half the time I refer out to other folks since I
Hmm,
realize what they need might not be what I'm offering, or I'll partner with another colleague. One organization, I'm helping them build their fundraising infrastructure, but they really needed somebody or a team of folks that understood digital design and evaluation of communication, not my expertise. So I brought in
sure.
another group uh, to partner with me on that, and it added tremendous value. And they wanted just one person to manage their set of projects, so it worked out great. In other cases, I just say I'm not the right person.
Yeah, no, that's good.
uh,
To have that confidence, because uh, uh, so a lot of people will get into this and say, I have to take everything because I don't know if things are not going to work out one way or another. And yet
yeah.
you found that there are enough out there for what you want.
Yes,
And that makes a huge difference. Yeah.
it does. It makes a huge difference. It also is relieving.
Hmm.
I'm comfortable saying I'm not an expert in everything, and that's well, I mean,
It's refreshing.
there's so many people that can do a lot of things. And it's also, when I've looked to join boards or be involved, there are times where I'm not the right person. And
Mhm.
there are other times where I'm like, you know what? You need somebody that can help you do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to get involved that way.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, now, okay. So you've brought up boards, and I know you've developed. I mean, you have a lot of expertise in that area. How does if a lot of folks will look at a board and think, well, this is the big honor. Thank you for asking me to be, and they'll jump right in, and then they'll get in trouble because they don't
Yes.
look at it like they should. So boards can be a nice entree into the nonprofit world for a
Sure.
lot of folks.
Yes.
What's your perspective on that?
Wow. Well, something you just said, it's a great honor to join a board, certainly, but it's also a great responsibility. And
Right.
unless the organization is sharing what those responsibilities are, I wouldn't take the role because I would fear that I could be getting into something that isn't, a good match for my experience and my interest. If
Mm,
a lot of organizations are looking to find like one, two, or three people at a time to join their boards, but they might already have roles fulfilled in certain committees. And if they don't have a space for me, and let's say I'm interested in finance, which I am, but that's not my expertise. But let's just say, for argument's sake, and
right.
they
Yeah.
have a full committee, I'm not adding any value to that board.
Mm,
Particularly if they're also looking for diversity. I don't offer much diversity unless they're looking for an LGBT person,
right.
because I'm white cisgender male. There are three-legged stool approach to
Mm,
approaching nonprofit service as a volunteer. The organizations could look at what skills do they need to have on their board, what roles do they need to fill, and what kind of attributes or characteristics do they want. And when there's a if there's alignment among those three legs, I
mhm.
think that there's a good match for a board person to join a board. That way that you're fulfilling the things that the organization needs, and that person is able to implement and bring to the table their skills.
And characteristics can be, yes, ethnicity, but also other things too, right?
Well, a national board based in New York, if they're only recruiting people, if a national organization only recruits people in New York, it's not diverse. You're not
Right.
representing the rest of the country geographically. You're only going to have, even if Sally drink a Coke and Johnny drink a Coke, sorry, I'm giving free ads, live in Seattle and Texas, they're not providing um, diversity if they haven't lived there in 20 years. So
Right.
there's geography diversity, there's gender diversity, there's diversity of communities that people are a part of. Some
Okay.
organizations, I'm working with one that they're setting a priority that they want to have folks that are involved in faith communities. Okay,
Hmm.
that's an important consideration given the organization's mission that they represent.
Right. And that in itself opens a broad palette of diversity as well. I mean, of the different kinds of faith communities they could have involved with an organization like that. So yeah, so there's almost a Rubik's cube, you might say, of these things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, to kind of
you could
get
say that.
to connect the right people into the organization. Uh, so do you find many people who are on boards? Well, maybe I'll rephrase that and say, is serving on a board a good way of tasting the nonprofit world, of connecting in?
I think so. I'm biased on that.
Yeah.
It's been in my career, my life's work. I think there's a tremendous. If I really appreciate there's a local, very hyper local neighborhood association that I'm interested in. And I
Hmm.
think that's essential to connecting with other people that I would have never connected with that live like a block away.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we're working on something that everyone can benefit from. And in my neighborhood, there's this neighborhood that I'm in is historically African American Black community. It
Hmm.
was originally Black Doctors Row.
Oh.
And the Jack and Jill Foundation was founded just a block away. Sherman
Oh,
Helmsley
wow.
grew up a block away, and it's the community is coming together to create to preserve the history and the buildings. Marian Anderson's National Museum is located a block and a half away, and there's a set of, you know, institutions that we're all looking to support, and it's rewarding to be able to do something with
Sure.
your neighbors in addition to the street cleanups that we do.
Which in Philadelphia it takes a whole new meeting.
Well, there's a lot of wind, and like the garbage day, the next day, it's like
Yeah. Well, I
all
know
over.
a lot of trash issues. The but and also though, I'm thinking if somebody says, "Gee, I'm thinking about a nonprofit career," is a board a good way of tasting what a nonprofit's all
Yeah,
about?
I'm going to I'm going to anonymize someone I know.
Okay.
Somebody I know pretty well has worked for a major journalistic service.
Okay.
She's been a lead writer and a manager of a team, and she really believes in fundamentally the urgency around providing healthcare and particularly HIV services to individuals at organizations around the country. But
Sure.
she had never, um, she went to law school, she's a great writer, but she never actually worked for a nonprofit. And the nonprofits were saying to her, when she was applying for roles, are you sure that you know what the culture is like?
Hmm.
And some nonprofits are very closed-minded about hiring non-nonprofity people.
No, totally.
just,
You are
just
very
like
right about that.
just like businesses are very closed-minded. They can be about
Yeah.
hiring government folks or hiring folks that came out of nonprofit land, and
Yeah.
that's not all. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. And she
Yes.
kept finding herself this hurdle. And so what she did was she joined a board
Hmm.
of a funder of HIV programs, got to be a leader in that organization, moved up, and then she started demonstrating her leadership and her know-how through that organization. And the opportunity provided her a way to get her foot in the door at a large organization because they took her commitment seriously, and they they kind of unclenched around the concern. I think this is a cultural thing that nonprofits should reconsider. The
Mhm.
people from outside the nonprofit land can make a difference and should be considered for roles.
Yeah.
There are cultural differences, and so we can't ignore them. But they can certainly be mitigated through onboarding, and they could also be mitigated by testing out, does that person have the understanding of how the organization can needs to be run. Nonprofits are run by boards and not the profit motive.
Mm.
It's a different
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah,
things
it is.
they take longer to happen.
Well, I kind of say that if you're in the business, I have a pencil, I give you a pencil, you give me a quarter, we're done. If I'm a nonprofit, you need a pencil, and so I give you the pencil for free, and then I look to somebody else to give me the quarter. And when you have that three-part dynamic, it's very different.
Interesting. I might have to steal that.
Yeah, go for it. But there are other kinds of nonprofits as well, right? I mean, it's not,
aside from
aside from
501c3 nonprofits.
Yeah, right. So aside
Sure.
from just straight charities, there's and like you're in the political arena, there's PACs or 501c4s, which didn't start as something different, but the political folks have kind of grabbed onto it. There's chambers of commerce, there's credit unions. Tell me, I think somewhere along the way we've talked about you being involved with other kinds of C organizations.
Yeah, there's tremendous amount. I keep learning more about how high the C numbers go, and the high 20s at the very least. So C4s I've had some experience with because they offer and are coupled with a nonprofit, and the C4 enables that nonprofit to go to a state capital, city, or federal government and do more direct lobbying for the issues that matter to the folks that they represent. The C6s, the chambers of commerce, I've been involved in some of those, and they're nonprofits, but they're not necessarily, you're not going to get like a charitable tax deduction when you're making a gift, but they're also tremendously good. They often provide a direct link to communities, particularly various cultural communities around the country that have a need to be connected and supported. When folks spend their money within a particular community, that could be economic justice in many ways. And so I see them as such. There are C7s, and I've been on the board of a C7, originally started by Sicilian immigrants in the late 1800s, but today it serves everybody. And primarily its focus as a restaurant is to provide healthcare for its staff, and also to provide food to the neighborhood in which it exists. So you can go there, buy a pasta meal. You could buy this meal, and it also serves another family. So you pay like $16, $18, get this pasta packet, and it also gets delivered to a local food pantry.
So it's like almost you buy shoes, you buy socks, you buy whatever, you get this one, and then the other one, another set goes to somebody else wherever else.
Right. Yeah. If you're going to create a social club with a nonprofit status, you need to have a charitable intent. You can't just be like, well, as I want to go to my own private club, but that's not there has to be a greater good in mind. And I know you know this, Matt, and I know
I'm fine.
I know everybody on this call understands that, but there's some folks that have asked me to help them start up a social club, and I'm like, you want to do a for-profit social? I'm not an expert in that area.
Well, it's funny. I belong to the Freemasons, and Shriners is a Freemason organization, and they have their hospitals as their charitable.
They do tremendously amazing things for those families that cannot afford healthcare.
Now I don't know whether they're organized as a C7 or not. I've never actually looked, but that's the kind of the idea, is that you'll see, and there are other. I mean, I can go through the Masonic world, Tall Cedars, and some of these others, and have special charities that are attached to them that they support as part of that social function. And it sounds like this group does the same. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, and there are a lot of different kinds of these that you never would consider as nonprofits, and you brought up a good point. You can't. Well, no, I mean like cemetery
You mean
corporations,
condo associations will suck the life
condo
out of you.
associations, right? Yeah, well, right.
I'll pass on that, but my father seems to love it.
There's credit unions, black lung trusts, mutual insurance companies, and really,
Oh wait, you're talking about the coal mining black lung
yeah,
truck
yeah,
trust? Yeah, that
yeah,
I need to read about that. I didn't know about that
yeah.
until
Those are
recently.
specific C type of nonprofit, and the way I think you can kind of tell the difference between a charity and some of these others is that if you can draw a circle around the members, it's usually they have a member type,
Okay.
and if they serve those members, then they may be a nonprofit, but you usually can't get a charitable deduction if you give to them.
Yeah. Right.
Whereas a charity is open to anybody, and
Yes.
it serves the whole community. And I think there are like 70% of nonprofits are actually charities versus these other kinds. And like you said, there are about 30.
That is an important distinction.
Yeah,
it is, because some of the nonprofits are exclusive, and so they shouldn't get. It's a moral thing for me, actually. Although we're not here to talk about morals. If you're exclusive, why should you get 100% tax deductibility?
Yeah, and so in our context, in this discussion, it's important for people to know that there are these other kinds out there. They are nonprofits, and it's another path into the sector. Working for or with a chamber of commerce is really important, and that could be your entree into the nonprofit sector as a whole, for example.
Absolutely. And it is for some people. Some of the chambers are setting up C3s as well, because they want to do a program. Let's say there's one I'm involved in that's setting up a C3 to provide a education and training program for folks in the community, which I'm super excited about. And they wouldn't have been able to do it as a C6.
Right, exactly. Or at least the members then can donate to that and get a charitable deduction.
The companies love it, because the companies are going to get their charitable deduction. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's helpful. That's really a good incentive. So tell us any other kind of epiphanies, anything else that you've seen now as you made the transition from and maybe the differences between working in-house and working independently?
So, this is a business networking group. So I'll just say I would encourage anyone that wants to start up their own business to consider doing it. And the epiphany was I never considered myself as an entrepreneur until I actually fell into it.
Okay.
And
cool.
and I appreciate the support I got from people who've been doing this a lot longer than me, and they showed me some of the ropes and gave me some advice. My mentor, she started her business 5 years before me, and she literally made her announcement at the same place I did to the same group of people, and I didn't know that. And they told me, you know what she said to us 5 years ago, sitting right here? And I was like, no. It was super ironic. Yeah, but the epiphany, one of the epiphanies was I never thought I would do this, and I did. And I think a lot of folks can do it, and it does take a bit of I have to say, if it weren't for other folks that have been doing this before, that I knew, it would have taken a lot longer. Yeah. So I had the privilege of having those connections. And if I was 25 instead of in my 50s, I probably would have not had those relationships, and would have been a much more difficult path.
Yeah. And it's something I think we can say about the nonprofit sector generally, is that people are supportive of each other. At least that's been my experience.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah. I mean, mostly, right. And I think it is a mostly, because there are folks who aren't don't play well with others, like there are in the world broadly, right? but I've found that it's been a good experience, because there are good people. You work with good people. You said you found this mentor. There are other
Yes.
people who are happy to help out with things. I get calls from friends. Hey, I'm looking at this. How did you address that or whatever? And yeah, and we're all happy to help each other.
It's also, I mean, I'm inclined to help, but I feel even more of a, ethical, uh, you know, compulsion. Like I really want to help other people. And I
Mhm.
enjoy being asked for support, and I connect other folks all the time. It's something I enjoy doing. And I think
Yeah.
it's important that we do it. It's like one of the things that speaks to the nonprofit as a sector is
Mhm.
that we're community minded. And I think we need to put where our money or our mouth is, our
Yes.
time where our hearts are, and engage people on, uh, you know, put our money towards the same thing. I think.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thank you. Well, Perry, unless there's anything else you'd like to say, I think this has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate your time here.
I
Uh,
enjoy talking with you. I also, I would appreciate any questions from our colleagues here because
yes, of course. Let's not forget. I nothing has come up in the chat, but let's see if anybody has anything. Thank you. Um, anybody out there who would like to chime in a bit? Yes, Lene.
Yes, thank you, Perry, so much. I wanted to just ask you a question about what is the day or a day in the life of Perry as you are involved with these different groups or organizations. How does that look, or a
I
day in a week, or a week's worth of engagements, or what does that look like? Can you describe that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question.
Mm,
What I do
well,
enjoy,
thank you.
Matt, you probably experienced this, Matt, yourself. A particular day I might be working on something with 8 or 9 folks
Mm,
from different organizations. However, there are days where it's just 1 or 2, and I need both of those days. There are days where folks need immediate responses, and if I can't give it, someone else needs to give it. I now have some subcontractor team members, and I'm probably going to have a full-time person next year at the rate things are going.
wow.
The uh, the the point though, there has to be some level of flexibility and responsiveness. Sometimes the organizations with whom I'm working, because they are rapidly growing, or in many cases they're understaffed, they do need answers relatively quickly. And if I don't get back to them quickly enough, or at least to say, hey, right now I can't answer that immediate question, I'll get back to you at a certain time, it creates anxiety on their part. So I find that it's important to stay regularly in touch with them on the one hand. On the other hand, I do have to set aside chunks of time to focus and not be disturbed. Um, and because naturally I'll be curious about something else, but I have to give my attention to particular organizations or a problem I'm solving uh, for chunks of time. Otherwise, I will fall behind.
Sure, sure. That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Yeah. So it's your ability to turn the tap, you might say, metaphorically. Have the connection turned on or turned off is really important.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you.
yeah. That's really good. Thank you, Lene. That's a very helpful question.
I'm also learning how to do that better, Lene. It's like it didn't come naturally.
Okay. You said you had been doing this for how long now as an independent?
So I started Labor Day weekend 2019, and
Okay. Okay.
officially, and then so it's been 2 years. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. And that was immediately after you're working in the political campaigns, right?
We finished the fundraising in August, and we were done. And at that point, there was no more money needed, and she continued to campaign and win. She was
Congratulations. That's
It was
great.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, so almost, I mean, you might be able to count that campaign fundraising as part of your kind of your start of being independent as well, because you had that one client.
I could, if I do that, then I started January 29th, 2019.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, coming up on
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
Uh, super. Well, good. Any other questions, thoughts?
I did have a question, Perry, about when you were talking about cultural differences. Can you give me an example or just, kind of share a little bit more about what you see or what you've seen, or what are some
Oh, okay.
opportunities there to kind of shift the
Mhm.
way people think about each other? Thank you.
So, I I forget exactly how and what context I used that phrase, but it could be that I was referring to there's some okay.
I think you're talking about business people coming in and not and how nonprofits
Oh,
perceive them.
okay. Yeah, yeah. So, um, well, there's even cultural differences within nonprofit land. So
Yeah, for
institutions of
sure.
higher education are, when they're hiring staff, they often even look askew to those who've come from nonprofits that are not institutions of higher education. They may not even want to hire someone from K through 12 education experience. And so there's this, there can be a hyper focus on, well, let's just hire people that are sort of from the same worlds as us. And I, for one, think that that is not always the best approach. You can find people who are from other places, and if you have too many people thinking the same, you're not going to have creativity or higher performance. We're learning that corporations that are more diverse perform better. Well, nonprofits, no one's doing the research, as far as I know, about how introspective and hyper focused on just who we are as an institution can actually hurt an organization's ability to be in a growth mode or a performance mode. That's my bias, is that there should be diversity of experience among nonprofit folks as well. So maybe that's the cultural differences, Matt, that
Yeah.
Lene, you're asking about. But if you're not asking about that, it could be that I remember when
Well, if I may, I mean, a lot of folks
yeah.
feel it, or at least the paradigm is that nonprofits are touchy feely, businesses aren't. That nonprofits have, everybody sits around the morning and sings "Kumbaya" together, and the businesses, they don't. I mean, there's that view from the outside that can skew somebody's perception of these things.
Yeah, I think that could happen.
Yeah. Well, I had a friend who's a search guy tell me that, and he only did nonprofit searches and largely fundraising. And he said that he finds there are institutional people and organizational people. And he would not kind of cross them between each other. So organization people are like the typical, you think of a charity organization, versus institutions. He put hospitals and higher ed and other things like that, who even orchestras to some extent, if they had a footprint of a building, that kind of defined that a little bit for them. But you're right, that diversity is huge. When I started at the University of Cincinnati, they were making a conscious effort not to hire people who were in higher ed, big higher ed. We had, I don't know, tens of thousands of students. They wanted people from either small colleges or nonprofits, because they wanted that perspective. They wanted something different.
Yeah,
and it really paid off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can. I think it really can. These folks need to be conscious about the perceptions or the experience of their colleagues.
Yeah,
It'll add value. It certainly adds value from my perspective.
it does.
The other thing is, though, if the cultural difference question comes into play around mission. So I remember interviewing the founder of Patrick Henry College, which is a homeschooling organization in Purcellville, Virginia. You might be familiar, Lene, because you live in Virginia. The gentleman
Yes, I
there,
am.
that gentleman that started that, Michael Ferris, was very clear about what culture he wanted. And if you didn't fit that culture, you didn't belong. And it was clear that, from my interviews, you had to come from an understanding and appreciation of almost like an educational utopia, separatist kind of perspective. And so that kind of, they wouldn't embrace cultural differences there, that if you have a different view on how folks should be educated, and that public education cannot serve the needs of their culture. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes you come across organizations that have very specific cultural footprints, and they're not interested in any diversity of thought.
Now, I'll preface by saying I'm not a lawyer when I say this, but as I understand that, if you in the nonprofit or religious organizations are considered nonprofits, whether they're incorporated or not.
Yes.
And if you are of a certain faith tradition, you are exempt from discrimination charges if you only hire from that faith position. If you're a Catholic organization, you only want to hire Catholics, that's your right to do. Now, I know of, I had somebody tell me one time in a class that she was hired specifically because she was not part of that faith tradition, because then she wouldn't, the fellow who was in charge said, now you won't be gossiping among everybody else. So,
wow. Sounds like a great management leader right there.
Yeah.
That was sarcasm.
Yes, I know, really. Right. Well, it was. I won't get into the faith or the other stuff about it, but it was fascinating that he had specific reasons why he didn't want to hire from this faith tradition, which was fascinating. But so
Wow.
You'll get that out there as well. It's
Sure.
And for what I've seen, there are corporate kinds of nonprofit environments. I know a substantial mental health organization that really that everybody in the line staff refers to the home office as corporate.
I've seen that. I've seen that with national organizations, and the local chapters do that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so it can be that, or it can be very much a different kind of feel, a more grassroots feel. So there's a spectrum for sure.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, a lot of mileage out of that.
So I had one more question about lessons learned. You said you've been doing this since 2019. What would you say is kind of one lesson that you've learned over this period of time since you started that has really, kind of helped you?
Lene, you just want me to pick one? There's just one. There have been so many, but the one that it helps periodically. I'll be honest here. Periodically, I feel this like imposter syndrome thing, and I'm like, I think I need to remind myself, and I've come to an understanding that having faith in myself is so essential, and not to listen to those voices saying otherwise.
That's really good. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. That's very, because I feel like I suffer from that sometimes myself, and so now that I'm trying to move into this new area, I feel like, I don't have any experience with fundraising. I mean, I keep my own books and my check balanced, but, so I have that type of a doubt, and so that just helped me very much, Perry. Thank you.
Good luck, and I appreciate you also sharing that too.
It's funny, I will tell you that is specifically not a fundraising requirement. Back early in my career, I had a colleague who was involved with fundraising and media and things like that. And he would say, I can never balance a checkbook. I just go to the bank and they help me with it. I think the idea is that you can find money in fundraising, particularly. You don't have to be able to count it money. You let the
Oh,
accountants count the money. You find the money. Well, great. Anything else?
it was nice to meet Christine and Lene. It's good to see Lynn and Matt. It's always great to be in touch with you. I
Yes, thank
appreciate
you.
what you do to bring education to so many people. And I can't
Oh,
believe you have 5,000 videos. That's a lot.
oh well, it's all.
No, I can believe I've seen them. You
Yeah,
know,
no, it's
I,
this, but it's just bringing together what's out there and putting it in one place. So thank you. And Lene is saying thank you and for the helpful discussion. And I will echo that for sure. Well, cool. Well, then we will wrap things up by saying thank you very much, Perry. When somebody would want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
they can reach me at my website is rpmconsulting.group. My email is perry@rpmconsulting.group. um, and they
That's
could,
good.
yeah, those are two ways.
Okay, and I'm sure you're on LinkedIn as well.
I am. I'm on LinkedIn
Yes.
every day.
So and there are a lot of people who use that conduit too. So that's super. Well, thank you very much, and I think we're wrapped up. Let's we'll call it a day.